neglect and abuse your children.
My opinion, Trina did not drink that vodka.
Some of the British actors you grew up watching simply disappeared from the screen, and some of the reasons behind it would leave you speechless. British film and television have produced some of the most recognizable faces in the world. Yet behind that success are careers that ended quietly, suddenly, and in ways fans still struggle to understand. What really causes actors at the height of their careers to vanish from the industry without explanation? You're about to find out. So join us as we uncover what really happened to 15 British actors who disappeared from the screen. Number 15. Gene Hackman. Although American by birth, Gene Hackman's relationship with British and international cinema across his career and the quiet way he exited the industry belong in any honest account of major film stars who simply stopped showing up. He retired after a prolific career spanning several decades, last appearing on screen in the 2004 comedy Welcome to Mooseport before changing his focus entirely to writing historical novels. He had won 2 Academy Awards across his career, for The French Connection and for Unforgiven, and had built a reputation as one of the most reliably excellent character actors of his generation. After 2004, despite numerous offers to return to high-profile projects, Gene Hackman remained firm in his decision. He simply did not act again. He spent the final 2 decades of his life as a published novelist, a private citizen, and one of the most successful and completely retired actors in the history of American film. After stepping away from acting since early 2000s, he rarely appeared in interviews, avoided red carpets, and settled into a low-profile life in Santa Fe, New Mexico, far from the industry that once made him one of the most respected actors of his generation. To many fans, it felt like he had simply faded into retirement, living peacefully and unseen. So when news broke in February 2024 that Gene Hackman had been found dead at his home, it didn't just register as another celebrity passing, it immediately became global headlines. What made it even more shocking was that he was found dead alongside his wife, Betsy Arakawa, and their dog, turning what should have been a quiet, private moment into a major investigation. Reports later confirmed there were no signs of foul play. His wife's death was linked to hantavirus, a rare and dangerous infection, while Hackman is believed to have died around the same time from natural causes related to heart disease and advanced age. A man who had spent his final decades disappearing from the spotlight ended up returning to it in the most unexpected way possible. But Hackman's story is only one part of a much larger pattern, because in Hollywood, some of the most unforgettable names don't end with a farewell. They simply fade away, and that leads us to the next on this list. Number 14. Bruce Willis. Not every disappearance on this list was voluntary. Bruce Willis's retreat from acting was announced by his family in 2022 and was the direct result of a medical diagnosis that left him with no real choice. His family announced that Willis had been diagnosed with aphasia, a condition that had a negative impact on his cognitive abilities, and that he would be stepping away from the career that had meant so much to him. The statement, issued on his behalf, described the diagnosis with the careful language of a family trying to communicate something deeply painful to a public that had loved this man across 4 decades of action films, comedies, and dramatic performances. Bruce Willis had built one of the most commercially successful careers in Hollywood history: the Die Hard franchise, Pulp Fiction, The Sixth Sense, Unbreakable, and Armageddon. His withdrawal from acting was not a choice he made about his career trajectory. It was his body and his mind making the decision for him, and his family choosing to be transparent about it, rather than letting speculation fill the silence that his absence would otherwise have created. And while some careers end because of circumstances beyond control, others end for a far quieter reason, because the final chapter feels like it has already been written. And that's the case of the next actor in this countdown. Number 13. Sir Michael Caine. Michael Caine did not walk away from acting because the work had dried up or because the offers stopped coming. He walked away because at 90 years old, he had just delivered one of the most acclaimed performances of his 70-year career and decided there was nowhere left to go but down from there. He announced his retirement on BBC Radio 4's Today program on October 14, 2023, revealing to presenter Martha Kearney that he kept saying he was going to retire, and now he actually was. He had just released The Great Escaper, playing a World War II veteran who sneaks out of his care home to attend the 70th anniversary of D-Day. The reviews were glowing. He said, "I've had a picture where I've played the lead, and it's got incredible reviews. What am I going to do to beat this?" Caine grew up the son of a fish market porter in southeast London during the years after the Second World War. He built a career spanning 160 films across 7 decades. Alfie, The Italian Job, Get Carter, the Batman trilogy with Christopher Nolan, The Cider House Rules, Hannah and Her Sisters. He won 2 Academy Awards. He was knighted. He told the BBC, with the dry humor that had defined his public persona for half a century, that the only parts he was liable to get now were 90-year-old men, or maybe 85 if he was lucky. He had taken a 2-year break before the official announcement due to a spine issue that had affected his legs, telling the Telegraph in 2023 that he was sort of retired even before he made it official. When the announcement finally came, it landed not as a sad ending, but as a man choosing the precise moment to step off the stage, while the applause was still loud. But what drives someone to walk away from a career that is still very much alive and thriving? Let us uncover the truth behind that decision together. Number 12. Cary Grant. Before Michael Caine, there was Cary Grant, the original template for the British leading man who conquered Hollywood, and the man whose retirement decision in 1966 shocked an industry that had assumed he would simply keep working until he died. Cary retired from acting at the age of 62, choosing to focus on raising his daughter Jennifer rather than continuing the career that had made him one of the most recognizable faces on the planet. He had spent 4 decades building a filmography that included 4 collaborations with Alfred Hitchcock, Suspicion, Notorious, To Catch a Thief, and North by Northwest, alongside Charade, That Touch of Mink, and dozens of others that defined what sophisticated Hollywood romance looked like for an entire generation. Ian Fleming reportedly based the character of James Bond in part on Grant, and Cary was offered the role in Dr. No before it ultimately went to Sean Connery. He turned it down, believing himself too old for the part. That decision, like so many of Cary's choices in the later years of his career, showed a man who understood precisely when to step back rather than overstay his welcome. After 1966, Cary Grant essentially vanished from the screen entirely. He did not do cameo appearances. He did not return for one final role decades later. He simply stopped, dedicated himself to fatherhood, and remained out of the acting world until his death in 1986 at 82. But Cary Grant was not the only iconic leading man to walk away at the height of global fame and never look back. Number 11. Sean Connery. Sean Connery's retirement was not a quiet fade. It was a man who publicly and repeatedly expressed his exhaustion with an industry he no longer recognized before finally making the decision official. He retired from professional acting following the release of The League of Extraordinary Gentlemen in 2003, a film whose troubled production he later described with open frustration, citing his dissatisfaction with the director and the broader direction the filmmaking industry had taken. He had spent the previous 4 decades building one of the most consequential careers in cinema history, originating the role of James Bond across 7 films, winning an Academy Award for The Untouchables, becoming one of the only actors whose mere presence in a film functioned as a guarantee of quality. Connery spent his retirement living in the Bahamas, occasionally surfacing for interviews, but never returning to a film set. He declined the role of Gandalf in The Lord of the Rings, the role of Albus Dumbledore in the Harry Potter films, and every major studio approach that followed his retirement announcement. He died in 2020 at the age of 90, having spent the final 17 years of his life entirely outside the industry that had made him a legend. But even Connery's total withdrawal from cinema wasn't the final word on what retirement from acting could look like. Number 10. Anthony Hopkins. Anthony Hopkins offers the most complicated story on this list because his retirement did not stick. It lasted long enough and was announced with enough finality that an entire generation believed they had genuinely seen the last of him. Anthony, knighted in 2014, announced his retirement from acting in 2017 after a career that took him from the Shakespearean stage to collaborations with virtually every major director working, including Martin Scorsese on The Age of Innocence and Gangs of New York, Michael Mann on Last of the Mohicans, Paul Thomas Anderson on There Will Be Blood and Phantom Thread, and Steven Spielberg on Lincoln. He had won the Academy Award for The Silence of the Lambs. He had played some of the most psychologically complex characters in modern cinema. And then he simply said he was done. What makes Anthony's story remarkable is what happened 7 years later. He unretired, returning to acting with the same quiet lack of ceremony with which he had left. The son of a Port Talbot baker, who built one of the most respected careers in the history of British cinema, proved that even a formal retirement announcement is not always the final word. Though for the 7 years it held, the industry and the public genuinely believed they had watched Anthony Hopkins' last performance. At 86 years old, Anthony Hopkins is living with a reality that many people spend their entire lives trying to avoid. The legendary actor knows his time is limited. He understands that every new role, every project, and every day brings him closer to the end of a remarkable journey. Yet instead of slowing down, he seems more determined than ever to keep moving forward. For Anthony, work is more than a profession. It is what keeps his mind engaged and his spirit alive. The challenge of studying a character, preparing for a role, and stepping into someone else's world remains as exciting to him today as it was when he first started acting. At an age when many people are looking back on their accomplishments, he is still focused on what comes next. Part of that energy comes from the way he takes care of himself. Recent medical examinations have shown that he is in excellent health, and he has made lifestyle changes to maintain it. He gave up sugar, cut out sweet treats, prioritized sleep, and says he feels healthier and more alert as a result. Away from movie sets, Anthony has built a quieter life filled with simple pleasures. He paints, plays the piano, and has unexpectedly become a social media favorite through a series of humorous videos that reveal a playful side many fans never knew existed. Whether dancing in his kitchen or making faces for the camera, he seems determined to find joy wherever he can. Yet not every legendary British actor looked back on fame with the same affection. What if the role that made you immortal was also the one you grew to resent most? Number 9. Alec Guinness. Alec Guinness built a career spanning the 1930s through the 1990s, playing 8 different members of the same aristocratic family in the satirical Kind Hearts and Coronets, starring in The Bridge on the River Kwai, embodying Lawrence of Arabia's most memorable supporting performance. He is regularly described as arguably the greatest of all British screen actors. What he is most remembered for by mainstream audiences is a role he came to genuinely resent, Obi-Wan Kenobi, in the original Star Wars trilogy. Guinness, a classically trained stage actor who had spent decades building a reputation for serious, technically extraordinary performances, found himself defined in the popular imagination by a science fiction franchise he privately found beneath the rest of his work. He continued acting until close to his death, but the frustration of watching his most demanding and celebrated performances get eclipsed by a role he considered minor stayed with him for the rest of his career, and he largely withdrew from the kind of public engagement that would have required him to discuss Star Wars with the enthusiasm fans expected. He died in 2000, having spent his final years deliberately distant from the franchise that had made him most famous to the broadest possible audience. But not every actor who stepped away from fame did so out of frustration. Some simply discovered that the spotlight no longer offered what they were looking for. Number 8. David Soul. David Soul became a global household name as one half of Starsky and Hutch in the 1970s, the American police drama that turned him and co-star Paul Michael Glaser into 2 of the most recognizable faces on television. What almost nobody remembers is that Soul eventually walked away from that level of mainstream fame entirely. He moved to the United Kingdom and focused on stage work and his music career rather than continuing in television, finding a new life away from the Hollywood machine. He became a British citizen later in his life, a striking decision for a man whose career had been built almost entirely on American television, and a clear signal of where his actual priorities had shifted. He remained active in the arts for decades after leaving Hollywood's mainstream spotlight, performing in British theater productions and pursuing his music, but the version of David Soul that millions of American television viewers remembered from the 1970s simply never returned to screens at that scale again. He died in January 2024, having spent the final decades of his life almost entirely outside the entertainment ecosystem that had made him famous. David Soul's departure was gradual. the next story is different. What would make someone leave at the very moment their fame was still growing? Number 7. Phoebe Cates. Phoebe Cates built significant fame through the 1980s in films that became generational touchstones and then made one of the cleanest and most complete exits from the industry of anyone of her commercial stature. She is regularly cited as one of the most notable actresses to retire from acting and the entertainment industry entirely, choosing to step back to focus on raising her family with her husband, Kevin Kline. Unlike many actors who take extended breaks and eventually return for select projects, Phoebe's departure from acting has been remarkably permanent. She built a second career, running a successful retail business in New York City, and has given only sporadic interviews across the decades since her retreat from acting, consistently making clear that the version of her life built around Hollywood was a chapter she had closed rather than a door she had left ajar. While Phoebe Cates stepped away from Hollywood, the creative spark never left the family. The couple's first child, Owen Joseph Kline, was born in October 1991. Growing up surrounded by actors and filmmakers, he eventually carved out his own path in the entertainment industry. Rather than relying on his parents' fame, Owen built a reputation as a filmmaker, actor, and cartoonist. After appearing in projects such as The Squid and the Whale, The Anniversary Party, and the Oscar-nominated A Different Man, he took a major step forward in 2022 with the release of his directorial debut, Funny Pages, earning praise for his distinctive creative voice. 3 years after Owen's birth, Phoebe and Kevin welcomed their daughter, Greta Kline, in March 1994. Like her brother, Greta found her calling in the arts, though her stage would be very different. Performing under the name Frankie Cosmos, she emerged as one of indie music's most respected singer-songwriters. Since launching the project in 2012, she has released multiple albums and developed a devoted following, beginning with her breakthrough debut album, Zentropy, in 2014. As their children pursued creative careers of their own, Phoebe remained largely absent from the public eye. More than 2 decades later, that choice appears to have been exactly what she wanted. While many stars spend their lives chasing the spotlight, Phoebe Cates found something she valued more and never looked back. And while Phoebe Cates never seemed tempted to return, another famous actress would make a similar decision for many of the same reasons. Number 6. Elizabeth Hurley. Elizabeth Hurley built her career through the 1990s, most prominently as the romantic lead in the Austin Powers franchise alongside Mike Myers, and then made a deliberate decision in 2002 to step back from the demands of acting to focus on raising her son. She stopped acting in 2002 specifically to prioritize motherhood, a decision that removed her from the mainstream film industry at a point when her career trajectory suggested significantly more major roles were likely available to her. While Hurley has remained a recognizable public figure in fashion and media in the years since, the version of her acting career that existed in the 1990s, major studio comedies, and significant box office presence effectively ended at that decision point and never returned to the same scale. And while modern Hollywood still makes room for quiet exits, the most legendary example of stepping away belongs to a different age entirely. Number 5. Greta Garbo. No list of actors who vanished from public life can be complete without Greta Garbo, whose retirement from acting in 1941 set the template that every subsequent reclusive star has been measured against. Greta is consistently listed among the most famous actresses who retired from acting and show business, having built one of the defining careers of early Hollywood cinema before walking away at the height of her fame and never returning. Her decision to retreat from public life almost entirely, declining interviews, avoiding photographers, living for decades in deliberate and nearly complete privacy, became so famous in its own right that her reclusiveness eventually overshadowed her filmography in the popular imagination. She remained out of the public eye until her death in 1990, having spent close to 50 years actively refusing the fame that her early career had generated. Stepping away from fame is one thing, but walking away at the height of modern entertainment power is something else entirely. Number 4. Dave Chappelle. Dave Chappelle's exit was not specifically from acting, but from the entertainment machine, at a moment when staying would have made him one of the wealthiest entertainers alive, and his decision to leave anyway remains one of the most studied walkaways in modern entertainment history. He left Chappelle's show at the height of its popularity in 2005, taking a trip to South Africa to regroup rather than signing the reported $50 million deal that Comedy Central had offered him to continue the show. He spoke about the decision with unusual candor, telling interviewers, "Coming here, I don't have the distractions of fame. It quiets the ego down. I'm interested in the kind of person I've got to become. I want to be well-rounded, and the industry is a place of extremes." That sentence, "the industry is a place of extremes," captures something that runs through nearly every entry on this list. The people who walk away from extraordinary fame at extraordinary financial cost are very often doing it because they have recognized something about the psychological pressure of sustained visibility that the rest of us, watching from outside, cannot fully appreciate. Dave Chappelle eventually returned to stand-up comedy on his own terms years later, but the version of him that existed inside the Chappelle's show machine never returned. While some performers eventually find their way back on their own terms, others step away in a way that feels far more final. Number 3. Paul Newman. Paul Newman's late career withdrawal from acting was less dramatic than some entries on this list, but no less complete. Across a career spanning decades and including roles in The Hustler, Cool Hand Luke, The Sting, and The Color of Money, he built one of the most respected filmographies in American cinema. In his final years, he deliberately decided to stop pursuing new film roles, focusing instead on his charitable work and the food company he had built. His acting career ended not with an announcement but with a quiet absence that gradually became permanent. He died in 2008, having effectively retired from the screen in his final years. The next name on this list is a Crocodile Dundee star who chose home over Hollywood. Number 2. Paul Hogan. Paul Hogan became a genuine global superstar through the massive success of the Crocodile Dundee film franchise, then made the deliberate decision to step back from the industry that had built his fame. While he appeared in a few sequels and smaller projects, he largely retired from the Hollywood scene, preferring a quieter life in his home country and occasionally appearing in local media rather than pursuing the international film career that his Crocodile Dundee success had made available to him. He has remained semi-retired for many years, content with the legacy of his iconic character rather than chasing further commercial success on top of it, a kind of contentment that very few actors at his level of fame have managed to genuinely achieve. And yet, the rarest kind of retirement in Hollywood is not the sudden exit, but the deliberate decision to leave behind a role that defined an entire era. Number 1. Roger Moore. Roger Moore played James Bond across 7 films from 1973 to 1985, becoming, alongside Sean Connery, one of the 2 most significant actors ever associated with the role. Unlike many actors who continue working long past the point where audiences want to see them in their signature roles, Moore made the deliberate decision to retire from the Bond franchise while still commercially viable, publicly recognizing in interviews that he had reached an age where the character's physical and romantic demands no longer suited him convincingly. After leaving Bond, Roger largely stepped back from major film roles, choosing instead to devote a great deal of his time and public profile to humanitarian work with UNICEF, for which he was eventually knighted. His retreat from the screen was as deliberate and graceful as Michael Caine's exit, a recognition that the moment to step back had arrived, and a decision to honor that recognition rather than fight against it. He died in 2017, having spent his final decades known as much for his charitable work as for the tuxedoed spy who had made him internationally famous. Which of these exits do you think was the right call, and which one do you secretly wish had gone differently? Share your thoughts with us in the comments section. Remember to like, share, and subscribe for more. Also, click the next video showing on your screen. You will enjoy it.